Next up, we have Jennifer from Walmart.
Hi there, hopefully you can all hear me and see me all right. I'm gonna keep talking, so unless I hear otherwise, I'm assuming you can. I'm Jen from Walmart. I lead our sustainability initiatives here in Canada. So essentially what that means is I act as an internal agitator, pushing the business to integrate sustainable business practices into their everyday. So we don't look at sustainability as an add-on or as a standalone department, because the philosophy and the idea is really that we should be living our values in this area every day. So give me one moment here, and I'm just going to share my screen. I'm really excited to be here to talk to you today about some of the work that we're doing in this space, and hopefully inspire some ideas and additional conversation as all of you continue on your journeys to make new innovative packaging and make that in a way that's sustainable and that helps create a circular economy, much like what we heard Jasmine talk about. Reuse is definitely an element of that journey. So we'll dive right in. Just before I get into the packaging elements, wanted to touch on some of our sustainability goals. Overall, we do have very bold and ambitious goals at Walmart globally that are mirrored or enhanced in Walmart Canada as well. So you can see them up here on the screen: to be supplied by 100% renewable energy, create zero waste, and where I think this conversation is really headed is to sell products that sustain people and the environment. Walmart over the last couple of years has become really engaged in the circular economy in general. So I've just got a snapshot of some of the initiatives and things that either we're part of, leading, or undertaking in our own operations. So you can see we're part of the Ellen MacArthur Foundation New Plastics Economy commitments. We inspire and engage our supply chain to think about the products that they produce throughout from from an emissions lens. So looking at their energy consumption, how they're farming things, what kind of waste is generated, how can they pull in recycled content into their products, what does the packaging look like? Do you need a package? Can you reuse that package? Versus can you make it out of more sustainable materials? We're also founding partners of the Canada Plastics Pact that I believe was touched on already. So, or if it's not, it will be in more detail. So I won't touch too much on that. But I think the Canada Plastics Pact is a great example of just business and industry coming together to recognize that sustainability and building a circular economy is bigger than just one company. It's bigger than just one group. It's bigger than just one problem type. So it's bigger than, just something that you might see in food and consumable products. It's the entire value chain. And so what's really cool and exciting, and I'm excited about it, you could probably tell, about the Canada Plastics Pact, is we truly have folks from the beginning of the supply chain. So plastics manufacturers, resin manufacturers, to the very end of that chain, to the people that are processing those materials into new materials and commodities, are all sort of working together to advance that economy and make sure we can do it at a pace that is much more aggressive than any one individual company could do on their own. So really exciting work. I'm really excited to see what we can do with that in that space. So that initiative just launched in late January, so fairly new on the market, so to speak. I've also just listed a couple of things that are really near and dear to both myself, but I would say the global organization at Walmart. We've really pivoted to becoming or striving toward becoming a regenerative company. So truly looking at the way we source products, the way we bring them to market, the way they are transported to market, the way we sell them, and taking that holistic approach to figure out how do we do this in a way that not only is better for the environment, but better for consumers, because at the end of the day, anything that we can do to make our world a better place ultimately helps enhance the way we live. And again, we've committed to some fairly aggressive plastics packaging reductions. So we came out in 2018 with very, very ambitious goals to reduce our packaging, look at reuse, look at viable recyclable options, as well as some composting, and we'll get into that. So really at the heart of this conversation is what is this plastics and packaging vision? What does that mean and what does it look like? So obviously the number one thing is, how do we look at and strive for using less plastic in our packaging? Any remaining materials that we have, some things ultimately at this point still need a package. So what could we do to either make it recyclable or reusable? And how do we label it so that people know what to do with that product. So again, as I mentioned, reducing the use of plastics when possible is definitely right up there. We're also looking at a number of other things that you can see on the screen, but one of them is increasing the recycled content that we have in any remaining plastic packaging, and we're targeting that 20% on average, where that's viable and possible. And again, that's really what we hope to be the signal and the driver to the market to start pulling in that material that we typically see in curbside blue box or depot systems and make a viable market for that material, so that's not being shipped offshore, so it's not becoming someone else's issue, and that it's not ending up in landfill when we really don't want, we obviously don't want to see that happen. The key to that is labeling things so that folks know, what to do with packaging when it is time for it to be disposed of. We launched this program called How to Recycle, and in collaboration with the How to Recycle team. And it basically does exactly what you think. It tells a consumer how to recycle something, but conversely, it also identifies when something is not recyclable. So if it is an item that should go in your waste bin, it says that. And that makes a lot of people uncomfortable because, as you're developing products, you don't want something that's got an X for recycling on it, but it's the truth. And so at that point, it's a cause and a trigger for the packaging developers to sort of say, what can I do differently? Can I re-envision, reimagine this as a different type of package? So that sounds like a very big undertaking, and it definitely is. And as I mentioned, it's one that a lot of other companies are starting to engage through Ellen MacArthur Foundation, similar plastics pacts around the world. But to sort of accelerate this as well, Walmart launched what we call our recycling playbook. And again, it touches at the beginning on reduction and reuse, of course. But at the end of the day, we also get into some of the nitty gritty on recycling materials and what that means. So what you're seeing here is that it's not just about the resin type or the material being recyclable. There are lots of materials that, sure, if you collect them on their own and they're sorted on their own, you could recycle. You could recycle almost anything if you try hard enough. The challenge is, in order for it to be widely recyclable across a market like Canada or in the US, you need to have accessibility for your consumer base, as well as processing capacity to effectively take those materials out and convert them into something. And so when we are talking about recycling and a product being recyclable, it needs to consider that entire chain. It can't just be that the resin or the material is recyclable. And I've told this story before, and I'll share it with this group because it was impactful, I think, for the folks that I was in this meeting with. We sat down with a packaging supplier who laid a whole bunch of packaging out on the table, and it looks great. And the individual said, everything you see here is recyclable. And then I kind of looked at it and I thought, no. So then I flipped the conversation a little bit and said, okay, what is effectively recyclable given our market today and what we have accessibility to? And they took away almost 75% of the things on the table. And so I think that was what really sparked the rest of the folks in the room to say, it's more than just about asking, is something recyclable? It needs to be functionally and effectively recyclable so that we're not just creating downstream contamination or problems. So, and I do apologize there. I see that there's questions coming in. I will get to those shortly. And at the end, otherwise I'll be going back and forth and it won't be as seamless as we'd like. So before I show you sort of this live demo of the recyclability playbook, which again is completely public, it's made public on purpose so that people can see what we're doing, what we're talking to our suppliers about. It is reviewed by the Association of Plastics Recyclers, which have representation from North American recyclers, so that we're getting input from the folks and the companies that are actually doing this material or handling this material. But the nuts and bolts of the guidebook are to basically break it down into product segments and potential types of products. So you can see polyethylene bags and film in this particular instance. And you can see that there's a green section which says, in order to make it recyclable, here are the things you should do, and here are the potential things to avoid. And then conversely, there's a section that says avoid, which would be things that are red where there's a readily available alternative to that material, which isn't recyclable, that you want to move towards something that is. And then we have an area called advance, and that's the area where I think there's still a lot of work to be done, a lot of innovations. So things where there isn't an easily recyclable or widely recyclable alternative that's readily available in the market. We're starting to see that segment grow in terms of investment and innovation. So we're really seeing some of that come to life. I'm just going to pause this or stop sharing this, and I'm going to switch over and give you sort of a live demo of what the recycling playbook looks like. So it's pretty simple, again, completely open sourced, totally accessible to folks. Really encourage you to have a look at it. By no means is this the be all and end all of things to talk about in packaging. It's a piece of the toolkit or a tool in your toolbox when you start to think about designing products and things like that. What I think is really, really important for folks like yourselves on this in this world and this work that you do is, yes, it's about aesthetics of a package, but also the recyclability. And so there's some things that we've taken for granted historically, windows in boxes, for example. You know, yes, they look great and they can accent a product, but now you've got two materials together as opposed to just one. And did you need that window, or could you get away with removing the window? So Walmart's done a lot of work in that space where we've removed the windows in toy packaging as an example. So now you can see the toy. We didn't experience any increases in waste or damages as a result because the structure of the box is such that it still maintained product integrity, but you've removed a problematic piece of that package. And so it's things like that, and you start to think about what can that look like as you expand it out. So this is just sort of a high level overview, and this is a one kind of snapshot page of things to optimize, change, and advance. And again, those are those categories and sections where you want to stick to green when you can. If you're in a red category, you want to try to move it out. And then where you're in a yellow category, it's how do we work together and talk about alternatives and figure out if we can pilot and scale things. The other thing that I'll mention that's kind of a hiccup, I think, for a lot of packaging, people often focus on the primary package. So, you know, if you're thinking about a clamshell package, people are thinking about the plastic rigid clamshell and increasing post-consumer content there, or making it out of a material that's widely recyclable, which is fantastic. But a hiccup and a hang up, a lot of times people will then apply a non-compatible label to that material. So then basically you've taken this great primary package, you've added a secondary component to it that now makes that or downgrades the recyclability of that item. So what's something just to call out, again, it's thinking about the product in terms of how a consumer is going to use it, how you construct it, and then how you communicate what's on that package is also really important. The other thing that you'll see when you're going through this is some call outs of things to avoid. And so, you know, I gave you an example just then about the adhesive label that could potentially downgrade a product, but you also have to think about how a consumer uses it. So, you know, if you're designing a package and you need to remove 4 parts of it in order to recycle 1 part, what's the feasibility of consumers doing that? You know, we see that all the time with contamination in blue bins and curbside pickup. So it's how do we design something that a consumer can easily use, easily either reuse or dispose of in a proper manner without them having to do 3 or 4 things to it before we get there. The other thing that is in this guidebook that I wanted to make sure we touched on a little bit was this idea of compostable versus biodegradable. And I'm sure that will come up time and time again. I'm actually going to stop sharing my screen on this one. But there's sort of this idea that biodegradable is a good thing. And I'm not saying it's always not a good thing, but you have to be really careful on the terminology that people are using. So biodegradable doesn't mean compostable. Sometimes biodegradable just means it will break down into smaller plastic pieces versus something that's truly certified compostable, which breaks down into its natural organic parts over time. And the key there is looking for certified compostable things, because that means it meets certain criteria in your jurisdiction. So certifications differ by region based on the processing capacity and facilities that are available in those areas. But you'd want to look for something credible in the jurisdiction you're designing for. And I think that it is something to keep pushing and to make sure you're having those conversations, because again, there's a lot of just information that people hear biodegradable and think, yay, and that's not necessarily always a good thing. So definitely always good to engage in those conversations. One of the biggest pieces of wisdom I would sort of pass along to you, and it seems so basic, is just to continue the dialogue and to make sure that you're asking questions and asking, could something be done differently? You know, we saw some great examples with Loop about changing consumer perception on how do you recover things. You think about a system that we've taken for granted, I would suggest in Canada, at least, with our beer bottle system. We've had a reusable beer bottle system for, you know, since the early 1920s. And so we've seen those things work, and we've seen consumers sort of shift to and from those, and you know, asking the question on what can we do and how do we facilitate that and how do we change those mindsets. It's really the start of the conversation. And, you know, are you going to be able to move the needle from 0 to 100 in one conversation? No, probably not. But you start to plant the seed with your suppliers. You start to plant this idea of innovation and sort of saying, let's look at this differently. Let's take this product that we've always done this way and think about how do we do something differently. So that was sort of it for my prepared remarks. I will show you, I apologize, it got a little beat up, but this isn't, oh no, you can't even see it. I have an example here of a package that we redesigned where we took out the window and we took out some of the dyes. So you can still see the natural color of the crepe paper. It's certified, the fiber itself is certified as sustainable through FSC. We've got the How to Recycle logo on it. It's a really well thought out package because again, it goes back to that idea of minimizing your impact and thinking about what is a consumer going to do with that package? Is someone going to remove a window? Probably not. They're going to, more than likely, if it's not something that can be reused, put it in their recycling bin as they need to. But I will pause there and I will flip over to the chat. I'm not going to lie, there's a lot in there, so let's see we'll see what we can find here. Going back up here. Oh, I see that folks are looking for some info on how to recycle. And again, that website is also completely public and available to folks. Again, it's not the surefire be all end all, but it's an option and again, a tool in the toolkit for helping to communicate.